In October 2022, Elon Musk told advertisers he was acquiring Twitter to build a common digital town square. He promised it would avoid becoming a hellscape, remaining instead a healthy space where a wide range of beliefs could be debated. A public square implies a level, open playing field. It suggests a civic structure where any citizen can walk up, take a stand, and have their voice weighed equally in a neutral, democratic environment. This chart shows the decline in public trust for national news organizations in the United States. According to a 2025 Pew Research survey, confidence currently sits at 56%. That is a steep drop of 20 points since 2016. Now look at what happens when we filter this data for adults under 30. Trust in national news hits 51%, and trust in information from social media sites reaches 50%. For a generation raised entirely on the internet, those two lines have completely converged. The statistical parity between these sources indicates that for young adults, the institutional weight of a national newsroom no longer holds a unique claim to credibility. Legacy newsrooms often describe social media as a hostile competitor, but the transition of authority was driven largely by their own editorial choices. In 2022, researchers analyzed how reporters used platform posts in their stories. When quoting a politician, journalists treated the post like any normal statement. But when reporters embedded a post from an ordinary, anonymous user, the post itself became the entire subject of the news article. Consistently embedding platform content as a primary news source signals to the audience that the feed itself is a credible destination for finding the truth. As millions flooded onto these platforms expecting a public square, they instead entered an infinite feed engineered to hold their attention through rapid, high-emotion, conflict-driven interactions that prioritize friction over nuance. Legacy newsrooms effectively surrendered their gatekeeping role. By constantly directing their readers back to the feed to see the story, they validated the platform as the location where news actually happens. Once these feeds absorbed the institutional credibility of traditional media, they applied their own distinct set of rules to the information they distributed. This diagram illustrates a field experiment from 2018. Researchers surveyed Democrats and Republicans, then randomly assigned them to follow automated bots that injected opposing political viewpoints into their daily feeds for a month. The study challenged the assumption that encountering different viewpoints leads to moderation. Instead, Republicans exposed to liberal bots became substantially more conservative, and Democrats trended slightly more liberal. Constant exposure to the opposition actually drove users toward the political extremes. The underlying code of the platform actively ranks and curates what users see. Because this software prioritizes immediate engagement over factual accuracy, it heavily promotes posts with intense emotional rhetoric, actively engineering which political ideas gain visibility. The code acts as a deliberate editorial force, deciding what catches on and what fades away. A system that actively shapes and ranks discourse cannot, by definition, operate as a neutral public square. To understand why audiences left legacy media so quickly, we must look closely at exactly who traditional newsrooms served before digital platforms arrived. As the traditional advertising model collapsed over the last 2 decades, surviving news outlets adapted by catering their coverage to the readers who had the most purchasing power. This meant consolidating resources around audiences that were disproportionately wealthy, white, and liberal. This map of the United States highlights the geographic cost of that business strategy. Between 2007 and 2018, more than 2,000 counties lost measurable newspaper employment. They lost the reporters assigned to cover local schools, hospitals, and city councils. The resulting vacuum had an immediate political consequence. 95% of those specific counties voted more heavily Republican in subsequent elections. When working-class communities migrated to digital feeds to find information, they were making a highly logical decision. They sought out alternative networks because traditional institutions had structurally abandoned them. This pattern of exclusion has deep historical roots. In 1827, the black press was established because white-owned newspapers refused to cover black communities accurately. The need to build alternative communication networks has always existed. Decades later, black social media users utilized platforms to build vast digital networks that functioned as a modern counter-narrative. They created their own spaces to hold institutions accountable and control their own representation, bypassing mainstream media entirely. An institutional vacuum occurs when a foundational community pillar is suddenly removed, leaving a massive destabilizing void behind. When local news disappears, that void is instantly filled by whatever network is easiest to access. Marginalized groups did not turn to tech platforms out of gullibility. They utilized these digital tools because the exclusionary practices of traditional journalism left them with no reliable civic space of their own. Digital platforms did not create the current crisis of trust. They magnified the consequences of structural failures already embedded in the news industry. Regulating tech monopolies and algorithmic feeds is only part of the solution. Rebuilding a healthy information ecosystem requires directly confronting the ingrained elitism and resource hoarding of our oldest newsrooms. Before traditional media can reclaim its lost authority, the industry must finally answer exactly who it was built to serve and decide if it is willing to change that answer.